I lost my brother this past few days ago, and had to take a few minutes to adjust to the reality of that.
I lost my brother from coronavirus. He passed away on April 23rd from the virus. I lost two physicians that I worked very closely with from COVID. I feel like I was doing better. I think for me, it's the marathon of it all. It's starting to kind of show its wear and tear. Like I feel exhausted often. I feel a bit at a loss. I'm emotional about some of the aspects that's happening, from just the things that I've seen with dealing with patients and dying in front of me from coronavirus. This is nothing I've ever seen in my 20-year career. Nothing like this. And to go on top of this, to see lives taken away.
Hello, I am Stephanie Officer. I am joined by Dr. Samson Davis and Rondell Johnson, and we are going to have something of a therapy session to discuss the weight of the double pandemic that we are all experiencing.
Dr. Samson Davis is a board-certified ER physician.
This is my 6th straight day working, so I'm exhausted but pushing through.
The New York Times best-selling author also co-founded the Three Doctors Foundation, dedicated to giving back in his hometown of Newark, New Jersey for the last 20 years. Because of COVID-19, Dr. Davis has seen, at this point, entirely too often, the mortifying rate at which the virus has torn through individuals and families, including his own.
We're in the midst of COVID-19 at what has now become the height for many other places around the country, whereas we're kind of on the downside. Now we're being hit with this explosion, just bottled up emotion in regards to what happened in that brutal killing of George Floyd. Talk to me, Dr. Davis, about your experience now, because it's one thing to deal with COVID, but then it's another thing to have all these underlying issues, which we've all dealt with for decades and decades.
So you're dealing with the aspects of that. Then you take George Floyd and what happened with George Floyd, and what has been happening in this country over 400 years is the racism that exists. And so you add that sort of pandemic within the pandemic, and then just your own personal life of survivability and businesses shutting down and trying to survive financially for you and your family. It's a lot to take on. And I think what we have seen specifically with George Floyd is that enough is enough is enough is enough. There's no more wiggle room. There's no more excuses.
No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace.
And Dr. Samson, how are you doing personally?
I was pulled over by a police officer last week. Literally it was like a detour to get off the exit because of construction being done on the highway. So I took the detour and pulled off, and the police officer pulled me over. He said, "Well, you exited too soon. The sign said 500 yards ahead." Okay, 500 yards ahead. Okay, so I was 500 yards early, and you're pulling me over for this. Luckily, you had my uniform on and showed I was a physician, and he let me move on. But it's just those type of things I think are the racial acts that I've felt in this country over and over again.
Dr. Davis recalled a recent incident at one of the hospitals where he works. A director said he got a complaint that Dr. Davis was outside on the phone.
He said, "I don't know how true this is, because your numbers are better than the standard in our department. Your production is better than the standard in our department. Your patient satisfaction is better than the standard in the department." So I walked outside to get some air. So whether I'm on the phone, meditating, sitting quietly, or just talking to a stranger, what difference does it make? I took 5 minutes to go speak on the phone. I went to school for 12 years to have this autonomy, the heck I want to do in those specific moments, and not question about that. And so it's an issue because I did that, or is it an issue because it's me in this position of a position of power that I don't belong in the thought of it all, that made it an issue. And so these are the questions that always come on, and that's the type of discrimination and racism I have experienced, is this sort of kind of undercut, very covert racial undertones that I feel, which it makes no sense. Like, my productivity is above the average, so why are you even coming to me with this sort of energy that has nothing but negative cognitive?
Rondell Johnson is a licensed master social worker with the Community Healthcare Network based in New York City. The nonprofit provides medical services for the city's underserved population.
I think there's a couple of things that's there. And before I start and say anything, first I want to offer my condolences for your losses. Right? That just having that on the table. And for us, a lot of us, the incident that occurred with George Floyd, unfortunate, was pretty much the tipping point for us, right? I think Will Smith kind of said it best, that racism, discrimination, those things, they aren't new, but they're being filmed a lot more. And it's sad that it took for a global pandemic for the world to now take notice, because now you're forced to see it. Just kind of backing up a little bit that, and just speaking directly about like some of your experiences, right? That there's also that dual consciousness that develops, right? That, you know, there's me as the professional, and then there's me as a Black man that's going through the day-to-day, right? And sometimes those experiences don't align with one another, right? It's like I have an oath for this, and then I have an oath for that. And which one do I nurture during this time? But it should also be both.
Yeah, you know, I agree. It should be both. And I think the challenge that we have is that, you know, especially as Black men, we're not allowed to have any moment of weakness. We're not allowed to be vulnerable in any particular moment. We have to show strength throughout the whole process. I think at a point, I'm just exhausted.
And a lot of that, right, that thing that we're carrying on our shoulders is that trauma, right? Hence why our responses are so like immediate and quick, right? That to someone else of, say, a different background, they're like, well, was it that deep? But it's all of the different things. And while this one incident may not have been that deep, so to speak, there are multiple other ones that were, right? And now I'm at a place where these things are now all assimilated, right? So I can't tell the difference between the difference in them, right? And it's, how do I undergo that process to where there's more of that balanced view, that I can say things like, you know what, in this incident, this isolated incident, that, okay, this wasn't something, but more, it was this. Then, you know, for you, Dr. Davis, there's also that aspect of being an ER physician who is encountering death on such a high scale, right? So of course you're gonna feel tired, feel heavy, and feel as though there's nothing more that I can do but do my marching orders, right? That I'm just trying to get through the day the best way that I can.
So Rondell, what are some coping mechanisms that Dr. Davis can specifically use, you know, especially pertaining to his occupation, and again, this second layer when it comes to these racist incidents?
A couple of things, you know, for the day-to-day, right? That there's those aspects of just engaging in those mindfulness type of activities. When we think about mindfulness, that they're in different categories, right? That there's relaxation, and those are more of those breathing ones to obtain more of like that relaxation and that restorative of energy, right? Then there's also those ones where we distract, right? And those coping skills, right? Those things where, how do we get involved with activity that pulls our attention and fully immerses us within it? And then sometimes, for some of us, there's that aspect of the physical coping skills where we're trying to just rebalance ourselves and decrease some of that excess energy that we have, right? We see them sometimes with like stress balls, or, you know, dancing, shredding paper, walking, or even exercising. And then lastly, there's also those aspects of just processing coping skills, right? Where we're trying to reframe and restructure those challenging thoughts and situations. And sometimes we do them by just drawing or journaling, you know, asking, what do I have control over right now versus what don't I have control over? And orient ourselves to the things that we do have control over.
Do you do any of those things, Dr. Davis?
I do. Like, I feel that, you know, I think what I really want to come across, like I'm trying to speak not only for myself, but for many people in our positions and what we've been suffering from. But I exercise, I meditate, I do a lot of reading. When the country was open, I traveled a lot. So I do all those things to kind of sort of, and just the mindfulness of it all, like, and optimism. You know, I really feel with hope and optimism that this too shall pass.
Do you think that you might be experiencing, or will experience, once things start to move into opening phases, do you think that you might be experiencing PTSD or anything like that?
I think it's there, but I don't think it's there in a way for me, because of what was mentioned in mindfulness. Is like I'm mindful of it. And I know that you have to know yourself. So sitting here with cabin fever for the last 3 months, like I can't wait to be back out there, but I know I'm not alone. And that brings a sense of satisfaction and camaraderie And there's that feeling of having like I'm not alone in this struggle that makes you feel like a sense of comfort.
There's a myriad of emotions, right? Fear, anger, sadness, grief, loss, but yet still hopeful and excited because things are moving and we're seeing a lot of that. But then as the clinician in me, I agree with Dr. Davis that, how do we tune into ourselves? How do we check our own temperatures, right? And knowing when to say, okay, well, these are the times in which I need to be engaged in something because it's feeling like a lot. This way, when we do reach the other side of it, right, that we feel like we're able to fully participate within it.
I'm going to reintroduce and be excited about that point in time. And also feel that we will look back at this moment in our life at some point, 5, 10, 2 years from now, whatever that mark is, and say this was a period of time that we endured, that we got through, and it's something that we will never see again in our lifetime.
For Inside Edition Digital, I'm Stephanie Officer.